Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Australia is poised to pass new laws to enable a national gun buyback and tighten background checks for gun licenses in response to the country's worst mass shooting in decades at a Jewish festival last month. Danish soldiers have arrived as part of the Arctic endurance military exercise in Greenland's Kangerlussuaq as US President Donald Trump intensified his push to wrest sovereignty over the Arctic island from fellow NATO member Denmark. Hundreds of protesters take to the streets in Atlanta to mark Dr. Martin Luther King Day and call attention to what they see as ongoing social injustices and Trump's anti-immigration crackdown. US President Donald Trump and Syrian President Ahmad al-Sharaa held a phone call where US has shown support to Syria's territorial unity, protect Kurdish rights within the Syrian state, while both expressed a shared vision for Syria, while the Gulf Cooperation Council and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has called the move essential. Jordan's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi held a separate phone call with Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan and Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan to discuss regional developments including the situation in Gaza and to strengthen coordination. The talk comes amid ongoing regional tensions. The UAE Ministry of Defense has denied Yemeni government claims that it operated secret prisons or stored weapons at Riyadh airport in Yemen, calling the allegations as misinformation as the UAE claims that its forces completed a full and public withdrawal from Yemen on January 2nd of this year. According to Kabul police, at least 7 people were killed and more than a dozen wounded in a suicide bomb attack at a Chinese restaurant in Kabul, with police confirming the dead included 1 Chinese national and 6 Afghan, while the Afghan branch of Islamic State has claimed responsibility. Taiwan aims to build a democratic high-tech supply chain with the United States and form a strategic AI partnership under the new tariffs deal it sealed with Washington last week, according to Taiwan's Vice Premier Chang Li-chun. Now for this hour, we start with Middle East. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed there will be no Turkish or Qatari soldiers in post-war Gaza, reaffirming Israel's strong objection to the makeup of US-backed advisory panel for the region. Netanyahu's comments came after the White House announced Board of Peace chaired by US President Donald Trump as part of a 20-point peace plan aimed at ending the Gaza conflict. The plan includes a Palestinian Technocratic Committee and a Gaza Executive Board, which Netanyahu has criticized for including Turkish and Qatari officials. The Israeli government has instructed its foreign minister to raise the issue with US Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Netanyahu has also emphasized that Gaza would be demilitarized and Hamas disarmed under Phase 2 of the plan. Let's listen into what Netanyahu has shared.
שלב ב' אומר דבר אחד פשוט, החמאס יפורק מנשקו ועזה תפורז. אנחנו דבקים ביעדים הללו והם גם יושגו. הם יושגו, כפי שאמר הנשיא טראמפ וגם אני אמרתי, או בדרך הקלה או בדרך הקשה. כן, ואני רוצה להדגיש עוד משהו. חיילים טורקיים וחיילים קטרי לא יהיו ברצועה. יש לנו ויכוח מסוים עם ידידינו בארצות הברית על הרכב מועצת היועצים, כך קוראים לזה, מועצת היועצים שתלווה את התהליכים בעזה.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Professor Rohan Gunratna. He's an international affairs expert, joins us live from Singapore. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us again. Good to see you. Looking at this, can you tell us why this strong opposition from Israel towards Qatar, and particularly Qatar and Turkey for joining this piece of board?
Asuma, the main allegation made by Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel is that Doha in Qatar was the main venue for Hamas to live, and in fact Israel attacked the Hamas safe house also in Doha. But the Israelis are now claiming that Hamas is being hosted by Turkey. And these are the two principal reasons Israel believes that neither Qatar nor Turkey should be a part of the force that is being established in Gaza now, what you call the International Stabilization Force to maintain peace. So Israel believes that Qatar and Turkey has a very close relationship with Hamas, and I believe that this has caused a huge debate between Netanyahu and the United States, because the US wants Qatar and Turkey to be part of the International Stabilization Force.
Right. And how do you analyze the current alignment between US and Israel? Don't you think there's a lot of disagreements between them for now?
Yes, they are very close to each other. In fact, Israel is America's closest ally in the Middle East. But at the same time, there are a number of issues that have emerged most recently, of which the most visible issue is Netanyahu's objection to have Qatari and Turkish troops as a part of the International Stabilization Force in Gaza.
And do you think that this will still be effective for long term, this board of peace, even though there's so many disagreements, and even we saw claims that some of the European countries who were invited to join have raised concerns about how it's not sticking to what was agreed earlier?
President Trump is determined to move forward from phase 1 of the Gaza peace plan to phase 2, which is the release of the hostages, both deceased and living, which is now complete with the exception of one hostage. So phase 2 has now just started, which is the establishment of the International Stabilization Force, and of course the Board of Peace that President Trump will chair. But there are many disagreements in Europe about joining the Board of Peace. So I believe that these matters will be ironed out in the coming days. Peace in the Middle East is inevitable because the Middle Easterners are tired of being associated with terrorism. And I think that because of the public desire to have a stable Middle East, this peace process will go through, but there will always be challenges and difficulties and threats as the world moves to restore peace and security in the Middle East.
Right. So what do you think should be done for long term, if it's kind of hazy, the effectiveness of this board, and even the Middle East, peace in Middle East sounds so alien for now?
One is that the Arab countries and other governments should never regard Hamas as a resistance group. I have seen some leaders referring to Hamas as a resistance group. Certainly the Palestinian cause is a legitimate cause, but to call Hamas, that mounted a brutal attack October 7, 2023, a resistance group is wrong. Second is that there must be a sustained peace process, and meaning there shouldn't be favoritism when it comes to quick, short-term political gain. It should be a security-first approach. And Muslim Brotherhood, the terrorist and the extremist groups are empowered by the ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood, including Hamas, which is the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood, should be dismantled. I think the US has already designated 3 branches of the Brotherhood. It should persist and it should expand. And of course, the third is very important. That is, the leaders should meet more frequently. President Trump, Netanyahu, European leaders, and of course the leaders of the Middle East, so that peace can be restored and Middle East can be turned out into a very stable and a prosperous region in the coming months and coming years.
Thank you very much, Professor Gunaratna, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for a later discussion as well. Now we move the focus on to Australia. Australia is set to pass new gun laws in response to the country's worst mass shooting in decades at a Jewish festival last month. The House of Representatives has approved the bill 96 to 45 votes, and it is expected to pass the Senate with Green support. The measures include the largest national gun buyback since the 1996 Port Arthur massacre and stronger background checks for firearm licenses using intelligence data. Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke has said that the December 14th attackers carried hate in their hearts and guns in their hands, underlying the urgency of these reforms. Let's listen into what Minister for Homeland Affairs has shared.
The terrorists who killed 15 people on that horrible day had hate in their hearts and guns in their hands. The tragic events at Bondi demand a comprehensive response from government. As a government, we must do everything we can to counter both the motivation and the method. We must deal with the motivation of hatred and the method, the firearms that the attackers used to devastate so many lives. This bill delivers on the government's commitment to address the methods of that attack. The sheer number of firearms currently circulating within the Australian community is unsustainable. Research last year highlights over 2,000 firearms are stolen or diverted to the illicit market every year. That's roughly 1 firearm every 4 hours. The fewer legal firearms in the community, the less opportunity there is for them to fall into the wrong hands, including potential violent extremists and serious organised criminal.
Now for this discussion, we welcome retired Major General A.K. Siwachi. He's a geostrategic expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Major General, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now looking at this, how might the scale of proposed gun buyback, even though very expensive for the Australian government, how do you think this will be shaping political support for this government security agenda, and how effective can this reform be?
Asuma, one thing is very clear. The laws in Australia are to some extent liberal, and that is why you find that this massacre has taken place. The terrorist action which took place in December last year, where more than 15 people were killed in Bondi beach attack, which Jews were celebrating their festival. Now the question comes is that they had a law which they made stick after Port Arthur episode which had taken place in 1996. Certain laws were framed, and they thought that possibly the weapons will be reduced. But to surprise, they found the weapons have increased even after making strict laws in 1996. Now they are trying to make it much more stricter, because what is happening is there is a gun lobby which functions. Remember, same problem is being faced by the US, and irrespective whether Republican comes or Democrats come, that no government has able to make a strict laws in US, because the gun lobby is so strong that they have so much financial influence on the government of the day, that they do not able to make a very strict laws. When it comes to Australia, now the government has realized it, enough is enough. They need to make a strict laws. And the new bill, which has been already passed in the lower house, and it is likely to be passed in the Senate also. The features are sixfold. One is that there will be much more sticker check, and intelligence agencies will carry out a background check before the license can be issued to an individual. Maximum 4 weapons can be procured by a person who is for recreational, and 10 for a commercial or the farmer type of activity doing it. The third very important is a large, you can say, those sophisticated weapons, also weapons which have got a belt type of magazine, they are forbidden. They cannot be procured by anyone. Then the importing of the weapons restriction have been also laid. And another very important thing is a buyback policy by the government. In the sense, if the weapons someone want to sell it back, the government should be ready to buy back, so that you find that the number of weapons reduced in the society. That has been also a very cause how Bondi beach attack took place. So overall, they are trying to build a multi-pronged strategy. One, that intelligence agencies must carry out a background check. Second thing is that the number of weapons should be restricted. Third is renewal, which used to be earlier in 5 years, now will be restricted to 2 years, and buyback policy of the government, which will also make a difference. So overall, a multi-pronged strategy has been developed in Australia to ensure that such incidents do not take place again. And remember that today there are 41 lakhs licensed weapons in Australia, and this is a cause of concern for the present government.
Right. Can you, Major General, can you highlight, how important it is for countries, not just Australia, but for countries to revise and renew these laws, as Australia had one of the most strict gun laws, but of course in 40 years, 50 years, I don't recall how long was that last renewal or update done on these gun laws. But at the end of the day, it became outdated. It was out of touch with the reality on the ground of how effective those gun laws were. So what do you think, how important is it for government to stay alert on these things?
Very correct. See, as far as Australia gun laws are concerned, you very rightly hit the nail on the head. They are by and large were strict, and after Port Arthur, episode which has taken place, massacre, where 35 people were killed, they made laws very strict. But there are lacunas in that, and why they found lacunas is that this Bondi beach attack which took place, one of the person, the son, father-son duo, they were under radar. The son was under intelligence radar, yet they were not keeping him under surveillance. So the laws have to be in such a manner they are as per the present ground reality. They have to be strict now. They have to be inclusive. The intelligence agencies have to do their work, and also to ensure that it is so strict that it's not easy to take a license. But what I said is the commercial angle come. You compare it what happens in US. What is happening in US is that every day there is some or the other casualty taking place with the firearm because it's so easily available there. But why can't the government make a strict laws? It is a commercial angle because the gun lobby is so strong because they are the one which fund the elections of whether it is a Republican or Democrat. They are not able to change. So there are commercial angle which also come into play. The countries have come about that. Remember that easy availability of a weapon without checking a background check of an individual, you are asking for a trouble, and that's how these incidents take place the way it has taken place in Australia. So therefore the point today is, in present scenario, you have to make laws which are suiting to the present condition and environment, and the laws have to be strict. Two things are very important. background check of the individual, and then availability of weapons should be made very strict. And third thing which they are now making is buyback policy. In case if someone want to sell it, the government should able to take that weapon.
Right. With that, I would like to thank retired Major General A.K. Siwachi for joining us today and sharing that insight. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Turkey and Syria. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has said that the deal has reached between the Syrian government and Kurdish forces after days of fighting that must be implemented swiftly, including the full integration of Turkish fighters into Syria's armed forces. Erdogan has added that Turkey would not allow any attempts to sabotage efforts to achieve peace and stability in Syria at a time when Syrians were longing for peace following years of conflict, as the period of terror in the region was now over. Erdogan has praised the Syrian government and stated that it was a very meticulous operation in the country's northeast, and Turkey's government would continue to work towards its goal of terror-free Turkey and the region, referring to a peace process with the outlawed Kurdistan Workers' Party militant group that Turkey considers to be linked with Kurdish forces in Syria. Let's listen into what Recep Tayyip Erdogan has shared.
Kuzeyini işgal altında tutan silahlı unsurların provokasyonlarına rağmen emir komuta zinciri içinde hareket eden Suriye ordusu başarılı bir sınav vermiş, haklıyken haksız duruma düşecek eylemlerden özenle kaçınmıştır. Suriye hükümeti müzakereyi önceleyen politikasıyla tahriklere açık bir sorunu olabilecek en az hasarla çözüme kavuşturmuştur. Tüm bunların Suriye'de kalıcı barış, huzur ve istikrar adına çok kıymetli kazanımlar olduğuna inanıyoruz.
Now for this discussion, we welcome back Professor Rohan Gunratna. He's an international affairs expert, joins us live from Singapore. Thank you very much, Professor, for staying with us. Now looking at this, what are the strategic objectives of Turkey?
Asuma, what we have seen is that since Ahmad al-Shara, alias Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, became the president, the ruler of Syria, he has consolidated his power in the Christian areas, in the Shia areas called the Alawite areas, and of course where the Druze operate. And just in January, that is this month, he began a series of operations in the 3 northern and the northeastern provinces of Syria to take control of the Kurdish territory. The Kurdish territory was governed by an organization that was led by Kurdish forces that defeated the ISIS or the Islamic State in 2019. But now the Syrian armed forces have taken control of that area, especially the gas and oil fields and also the water dams. It is in this area that there were 2 prisons, and these prisons host nearly 50,000 Islamic State or ISIS fighters. But yesterday, 2 of these prisons, the prisoners broke free. We do not know who is responsible for the prisoners being able to escape, but what is important to understand is that this is the single largest concentration of Islamic State fighters in any prison and terrorists. So it is going to be a very huge threat. Turkey is supporting the Syrian government. In fact, Turkey has been a very long-term supporter of the of the Syrian government to restore stability and control in Syria. So that is why Erdogan issued that statement in support of Ahmad al-Shara. What is important is for there to be a good relationship between the Syrian Democratic Forces, that is primarily Kurdish, led in the north and northeastern Syria, and Damascus. If there is no good relationship, certainly that Kurdish region and also the adjacent 2 provinces will become the fertile ground for the re-emergence of ISIS or the Islamic State, especially after prisoners, both male and female prisoners, escaped from these two prisons yesterday.
Right. Thank you for highlighting that. And can you tell us once again, how important is it for Turkish and Syrian forces to cooperate with Kurdish fighters?
Because the northern and the northeastern Syria has a very significant Kurdish population. They were previously backed by the United States when they were fighting against ISIS. The Kurdish forces were the main vanguard in the fight and in the defeat of ISIS. But now the US has withdrawn their support from the Kurdish forces, and they are supporting Ahmad al-Sharaa. So unless there is for there to be stability and security in Syria, especially its north, the Ahmad al-Sharaa should build a good relationship with the minorities, with the Christians, with the Druze, with the Alawites or the Shia, and now with the Kurds. Unfortunately, the images and the videos, the photos we have seen from the Kurdish region is very disturbing. Many monuments of the Kurdish people have been destroyed. Women have been arrested who participated in the fight against ISIS. And also there has been the breakout from these two prisons. So I hope that governments and these entities in Syria will work together to restore and build a harmonious Syria, because a harmonious Syria is vital not only for Syria but for the neighborhood, for the Middle East and the rest of the world.
So can you tell us why exactly did, if we know about this, but why has the US withdrawn support for Kurdish forces and then moved to support Ahmad al-Sharaa?
US has historically supported Kurdish forces to fight against ISIS, which was the biggest threat. But today, Ahmad al-Sharaa, the president of Syria, and President Trump, they have built a good relationship. And now, of course, there's a shift of alignments where the US has decided to support the Syrian government, which is a bigger entity and is more strategic today than in the past. So the US and governments always build their relationships based on geopolitical interests. And right now, it is of greater importance for the United States to work with Damascus rather than to work with the Kurdish forces in the north and the northeastern Syria.
With that, I would like to thank Professor Gunratna for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Greenland. The Greenlanders are speaking out, urging US President Donald Trump to stay away as he intensifies his push to take control of their island. Many locals have said that they live peacefully and do not need outside interference. Meanwhile, there is a strong opposition to Trump's plan, with residents stating that Greenland is not for sale. However, the island's sovereignty is under scrutiny as global attention grows, and former Trump advisor Gary Cohn has stated that Greenland will remain under its current ownership. As tensions rise, residents are increasingly concerned about threats to their independence. Let's listen in.
Væk, fordi vi lever fredeligt her, uden noget, uden at være bekymret. Og det er for vores børns fremtid også. Så jeg har det fint uden ham.
Og jeg bor her i Grønland, og Grønland er ikke til salg. Og det der Trump, han siger noget, det er trusler, det synes jeg er meget dårligt. Det synes... Hvis vi nu tror ham, Bidufik Tulle Abbas, han har den deroppe, det skal man være glad for.
I'm thinking about that the difference between us Greenlandic people and American people, that we can trust our politicians, that they are doing their best for our, not only for our country, but for its people also. So that we trust our politicians they will handle it well, very well, I think. No, I'm not frightened because I Europe that we stand together and they have our back.
Now we move the focus on to U.S. At least 9 people were injured in a massive pileup on Michigan's Interstate 196. Over 100 vehicles, including more than 30 semi-trailers, were involved as whiteout conditions caused chaos. Authorities have closed both directions of the highway near Grand Rapids while emergency teams work to clear the wreckage. According to reports, no deaths have been reported. Let's listen into what Lauren and Stephanie have shared.
We got up at 6 a.m., tried to beat the rush, but we ended up in it. So
yeah,
it was pretty unfortunate, but yeah, that's what brought us up there.
It was absolute chaos. I mean, everyone was everywhere, people out of their cars, people rushing around, trying to get the ambulances through. It was pretty packed and crazy.
That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.